Hello, everyone, and welcome to the San Francisco UX Writers Meetup. My name is Kirsten Forsberg. I am the organizer, and I will be hosting today's meetup. If you've joined us before, you might notice that the format looks a little bit different. That's because we are trying something new, and we know that it'll be great. It'll just look a little bit different for today. And if you are joining us for the first time, welcome. We are glad you're here. A couple of housekeeping items before we start. First, a big thank you to Indeed for sponsoring this event and for Jason, who will be providing tech and AV support. This session will be recorded, and we'll share that recording within a couple of days. Closed captioning is available. You'll find that on the bottom of your Zoom toolbar on the right-hand side. At the end of today's event, we'll be doing a Q&A. You can put questions in the Q&A button, also in the bottom of the Zoom toolbar, or you can put your questions in the chat. I'll be watching for both. Our next event will be in August. We're going to have a couple different UX writers from different companies and their counterparts share how they work together, and it'll be really great. We're still confirming some details, but look for more information on our Meetup page. And now on to the main event. I want to introduce Gladys Diandoki. She's a Paris-based content and conversation designer. She brings a background in media relations to her work as a consultant. We're delighted to have her with us today, and I'll pass the microphone off to Gladys.
Hi, Kirsten, and thanks for having me today. So I'm going to show you my presentation. Sorry. Okay, I try again. I'm ready, finally. So thanks a lot for being today. And so my presentation, so I introduce myself. So my name is Gladys, just like Kirsten told you. I'm a conversation designer and a content designer. So based in Paris, I work for Betago, which is part of the French government. I also freelance for other projects. So this is what I do for a living and every day. And I'm really glad you joined today to talk about this topic that is super important. And I think it's key for us as designers. And I really see us as designers. So I put this attention right now because I want to make sure that everyone who is here, what I'm going to show you is super advanced stuff or things you need to consider, and maybe sometimes you arrive at the end of the project, or maybe you're not considered and you won't be able to apply everything I'm showing. Even me, I'm not able to apply it every day on every project. But at least if you have the idea that you can do that and you can reach this point, it can change your perspective of your work. So it will really depend on the maturity of your company. But I'm glad you're here, and I hope you will learn a few things during this presentation. So it all starts with what we call the happy path. So usually I show you what it looks like. Like the user is here and they get into your store. So it can be an online store most of the time. And then they go out with their purchase. So it's super interesting because like they go from A to Z, everything is fine. Most of the time, I hope you test your path. It delivered, your client is happy, everything looks great. But in fact, this is, even if it's great and even if you tested everything, it remains problematic. Because, and just like I'm saying here, it's not so happy. So most of the time, it's super business. I mean, you have the business objectives, I hope, and if we did our job correctly, we have the user's objective. The action they should take is super clear. We know the step, like they need to sign up, they need to pay, they have this form, etc. But what I see sometimes is there are messages that are forgotten. some triggers like notification, email. So either it's too much or not at all. And sometimes it's just enough, and this is when it's perfect. And if we did not test, we don't have users' feedback. The idea here is to go from a happy path to a more human-centered approach. And this is what I'm gonna show you, but also I'm gonna bring you, new things you can think about to create more human-centered experiences. So the question is, what if we reframe the way we think, our path and everything? Why? Because our journey generates a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. If we did not think about all the error messages and everything during the journey that we need to consider. Like we can also, and I think it's where it's more critical here, it's when we get our user into trouble. Sometimes it's because of them, and sometimes it's going to be because of other people. But what I'm going to show you is a way at least to think or envision what could happen, and if possible, do it correctly. And make sure, everybody, most of the time when we create a path, we try to do something with thinking that everybody has good intention, and it's not always the case. But if we don't think about what could go wrong, or how people could use our product in an incorrect way, we also put our other user into trouble, and our product too. And so if we try to be more human-centered, we need to consider the fact that at the beginning of the day, people have a level of energy. And at the beginning of the day, if everything is fine for them, they are on top. It's not always the case. But so everything they're going to do during the day is going to take energy from them. And so when they arrive into your product, what we need to make sure is it takes them as little energy as possible. And really, everything, when the text is complicated, when it deserves, when they have to think about everything, when it's complicated, when they cannot do something, everything is stressful, and we take energy from them. And so the first step is always about research in UX. And the idea is, one, to make sure we understand our users' needs, wants, and experiences. Of course, we also need to consider accessibility and inclusion, and identify the stress cases and potential risk they will face. And that's one of the key points here. And so the idea is to go from what we don't want is to be product-centered, but go from user-centered to human-centered. And the key idea here is to think about the ecosystem and everything that can impact what the user is going to do, what will happen to him or her, or they. So really think about all the experience a little bit broadly than just being user-centered. Of course, I always mention, and I've talked a lot about inclusion lately. So we always need to try to reach a universal design. So who are the people we exclude? Think about our persona, think about being more inclusive, etc. But it's not about that today, even if it needs to be considered. Otherwise, we are gonna, they are gonna be super stressed and have a really bad experience. That's not what we want. But we also need to consider the antagonist persona. So this is the person who is going to use your service for bad reason. So either they want to break your system, your product, they want to cause harm to someone else. And it's something we don't always think about or question or research. But definitely it's someone, I think we should always have someone or this persona, and make sure we try to think our journey the way they would. So, we have, there is a good, I don't know, I think it's white acres. So people who hack products, but for good, and work with governments and other companies like that. I mean, it's reaching them can be a way, but also reading and looking at the forums and try to understand more of their mental model, just to make sure we try to think about everything that could happen wrong based just because of this person using your product too. During the conception, of course, we need to think about the triggers of our product. How can what we create hurt people, or how can it be challenging for people to use our product just because of what we do? Sometimes maybe if we send too many notifications, it will be too much and cause maybe not stress or harm, but that can be a challenge and a problem. Rethinking some of the path will be beneficial too. Like I'm going to show you one example. We also need to consider what we do, but also what external barriers, triggers, and risk are, but as well as cultural and societal impact. So what can be caused from society and impact our experiences anyway. So what we often do is know, okay, the person is going to search for my app, pay, download the app, etc. So we need to go from that to that. Like I picked the narrative arc that we can see in the storytelling. And what is interesting is you have the time and how much time, what is going to happen, like the exposition, which looked a lot like on onboarding, the rising action when people decide to take action, the crisis, and it's going to be stressful anyway, even when we have anticipated everything. The climax when people make decisions, and the denouement and the following action, so the end of the story. So we know everything is going to happen anyway, because there is always tension, even when everything goes well. But if we go from that to that, you can think about this narrative arc in a user-centric way and say, okay, what can happen? Where do I create tension from the inside, so from my product? Where the tension can come from outside. So for example, here I say, okay, is my form, so maybe my form is not, I may have a gender issue here. So it's something I need to fix and it can create tension. I'm going to send an email. So maybe I should look at this email and see if it's really beneficial, if it's spam, etc. But here in this case, I thought about when you need to share your data vehicle. For example, you have a service and you need to share data from your car, and it's something new. So should we inform? So if someone tracks this data, should we let the user know that someone can access this data, and how can I fix it before starting this service? It's all the question you can ask yourself about what can happen in the product, outside the product, and from other people, and think you need to consider just to fix the product and anticipate. There is this frame that I really love, and I discussed with Oak Thompson a few months ago. There is a stress case. It's Sarah. Sorry, I don't have the name right now, but so she wrote the Designing for Real Life. And sorry for the name and the for sorry. But she talked a lot about stress cases and what can be done. And Oak decided to use everything she had done and see if it could apply it to other cases and think about other cases. So here you can use this frame when you're in your team and say, okay, what are stress cases? What are the use case of course, this is what we usually do. What are the misuse cases? How can people use it incorrectly? And you can map it within the team. And what are the abuse cases? And I think it's super interesting because, at least as a team, you can have an idea of what could go well, what could go wrong, what could cause stress. And you can try to anticipate. If you do that before designing, you can start to anticipate your journey. And I think definitely it's going to help you create differently and be a little bit more careful for your user. Just like something bad that could happen, like everybody heard about Cambridge Analytica. It's a misuse case, like because everything they did for some part of it was allowed by Facebook, but they use it in a way that was not anticipated. So that was problematic. And that was also hurtful for people like us using the system and being, I don't have the word in English, but like we had to face something that was bad for us, and they use it in a way that was allowed, but was impactful for us. So that's a bad example. I mentioned the car industry. So, for example, in that article, it's the story of a man who tracked his woman. So he put something in the car, but if you have an application that can track your car and help you know where the car is supposed to be, how do we prevent that from happening too? Last point, but super important, is make sure you test, of course. I will always say that. So test usability, test accessibility and inclusion, of course, but also test frustration and stress cases. Something I love to do is test my error messages or put people into pressure, like it can be the pressure of time or anything else. But if we test our journey in a stress situation, we have so much to learn. If you test your error message in like not with a fake a prototype, but like in situation 2, you can learn so much. So the more you test, the more you can anticipate and understand, and the more your product will be better for your user. And last thing I want to show you it's about accessibility, but I think it was super interesting, so I'm sharing it with you.
We'd like you to take the 2-minute capture challenge. Imagine that you're on a website, you're buying some flowers for somebody, or perhaps treating yourself to a holiday, and at the last minute, one of those distorted text images pops up, and you have to decipher what it is and type it in before you can complete the process. This is really difficult for people who can't see very well, or who have dyslexia, for example, or if you're like me and you can't see at all, you have to listen to the audio alternative, and that's what we're going to play for you next. Have a go, see if you can understand it. It will be repeated twice. Once you think you've got it, write it in the comments box below, and we'll see if you can get it the same as other people. It might not be right, but at least see if you can get the same as other people. That's how hard it is. This is an example of inaccessibility. The web, the internet, is full of inaccessible things, and AbilityNet just wants you to appreciate how difficult life can be if things aren't done in an accessible way.
9, 3, 7, 9, 11, 0, once again, 9, 3, 7, 9, 11, 0,
Please now write down in the comments box below.
Okay, so I didn't know I went super fast, but what I want you to know is, like I said at the beginning, can we do everything? We cannot do everything by ourselves. And of course, we are not alone, we are in teams. So it's key to think about all those exercises, all the testing, everything as a team. So maybe what we'll do is just say, and if we thought about how we could impact people within our product, but definitely the key is to help people understand that we need to think about other things that use cases, so the happy path. We need to consider all those cases and make sure that when we build them, when we create them, we do the minimum harm, because sometimes it happens even when we anticipated things. But the more we do our work at the beginning, and the better the experience will be. So definitely that's what I want all of us to remember today, is that we need to think about all that and really try to be as human-centered as possible. And sorry for having been so fast. So, but it's more questions too.
Thank you so much for sharing. Just as a reminder for everyone, you'll be able to post your questions in the chat or in the Q&A section at the bottom. I guess my question for you, can you help me, so I guess when you're thinking about the narrative arc, how people interact with products, and antagonist personas, I guess, do you have a process for thinking through everything? Because it feels like a lot. So I'd love to hear kind of how you prioritize.
Yes.
Think about.
But that, I mean, all this idea, came from discussion I had during this year, but also I watched a video from a writer, and he wrote about violence. And that was so interesting when he said, when you care about your user, you always try to make them feel safe, even if they have to deal with trouble. But so if I take the narrative arc, the idea is, because we know there will be tension anyway. Whatever happens, there will be tension for them. So if you know what is going to be happening, what can you anticipate to make it smoother for them? And I think it's really all about that. Like, we know during the onboarding, if you at the onboarding phase, you give enough information, maybe it will be easier for them in the middle of the process. When you know there will be tension, can you cause even more tension or not? So it's all about anticipation, at least in my mind. But yeah, but the more we anticipate, the better the experience will be.
Yeah, that makes sense. We have a question from Naomi. Hi, Gladys. What do you recommend is the best way to approach having correct audio accessibility? What program do we use? How do we check it?
That's a good question, and I don't know if I'm the best one for that one, but for audio accessibility, what can I say? Maybe can I keep it for later, just the time for me to process it?
Yeah, and I in April, we had Stephanie Hagdorn and Casey Hunt talk to us about accessibility. I can reshare. I think that they would probably be some great people to talk about audio accessibility and accessibility related things. So I can post their contact information after we wrap up. Jess has a question. I'd love for you to talk more about some of the ways you've managed to carve out space during the design process for some of these exercises, such as testing misuse, abuse cases, particularly when getting pushback from other team members.
Okay, so, and that's why at the beginning I said we need to consider that it won't always be possible, but because we are storytellers for most of us, I think it's a good way to come with that type of thing, because we can think about scenarios and we can think about all those kind of topics. Everybody is not a storyteller, but I think we have those skills we can use. What I try to do when I can do it is, when I arrive early enough, I say, okay, let's think about all the cases, because I always have tons of questions, and I think we all do. So let's frame it this way with one of the templates, and say, okay, so this is what's going to happen if we take the narrative arc. What can we anticipate? What can happen? What can be the worst case scenario? And so that can help when you start designing the path. If we take the framework from Oak, it's the same process. It's just a different exercise that can help other team understand. I think we just need to pick what's best for according to the team and what you want to reach. And when you say when we are getting pushbacks, and that's why I'm saying sometimes I cannot do that just because I'm pushed back and the team is not mature enough. But I believe that in some other companies and projects, they will be more open to try that and think and anticipate. But what you can also show, because all the bad experiences, most of the time, not all the time, we see them on TV or in the media when it's a big brand. So you can also discuss about the impact, not anticipated and causing harm to people can have on the business even. Because you don't want, I mean, if you're Facebook or Google, maybe you can, I mean, it's money, but it's not costing you as much as for small businesses or other type of companies who don't have that much money to on the table to fight that. So I think the impact on the user and the impact on the business is a good argument. I don't know if that can help. But.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are, I don't want to point out bad examples, but from your perspective, what are some companies or products or even specific examples that do accomplish this really well?
You know, because we are not in those companies, I don't know. And I think it's just like UX writing. If we do our job correctly, most of the time we don't see it. So that's the main point. If they have done it correctly, most of the time we don't see it. But I have a good example of people. I mean, if you look at Facebook, but also Pinterest has shared the process for their trace cases. They said when people wrote suicide or mutilation and stuff like that in their research box, they decided to use it and tackle the problem and suggest answers. That's a good way. I mean, and they did not start with that. They started with working on their Q&A. That's faster than redesigning everything. And then they work with psychologists from Stanford, I think. And so that's the beginning. That's a good way to start. You don't have to do big stuff at the beginning. Maybe, like I said, a Q&A can help get started. But like I said, the most important is not to say, oh, it's a stress case, or no, it's not really important, or we don't have, I mean, we always have to run. We don't always have time, I know. But most of the time, a company is telling you we don't have time, they never have the time. So yeah, but so to and sorry, because I love so who is doing it right? We don't always know. It's difficult to tell you. For me, I mean, but I can tell you most of the time we can tell who is not doing it well. We did not anticipate because we can see it in the media, or we can see it when we use the product, and we can see it's really business focused, done fast, not well enough, not tested. You can imagine that the experience will never be human centered at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's when you were talking about Pinterest, I think, oftentimes we think of impact as, daily users or downloads or things like that, or I guess impact in terms of accomplishments, but there's also impact in terms of redirecting people who are, or maybe, looking into self-harm, partnering with psychologists and maybe not delivering results, or redirecting them to just a healthier
outlet. It's not all about creating this happy path, because life is more complex, and that's what is super well explained in designing for real life. If you don't anticipate that people can have a deceased child or anything else, and you only think happy, like go from A to Z because the business wants that to happen, and it's super fast and we don't have time, we know our users, etc. It's things we hear all the time. If this is the way the company and the business is thinking, they're not user-centric. They're not even user-centric. So it's going to be difficult for them to move from that to being human-centered. I mean, it's my definition, but that, yes, if you don't think about the impact and the impact of the environment too, that's going to be difficult. And that's also when I'm telling you, if we think about the antagonist, of course it helps everything we will create, because you can anticipate things and say, oh my God, we did not think about that specifically, and maybe we need to revise some of this stuff.
Yeah. I don't see any new questions in the chat or in the Q&A. I'd love to hear more. I guess I know this is a new format. If you have questions, feel free to post. I'd love to hear a little bit more.
And I was fast, and I'm sorry again for that.
It's okay. No. I'd love to hear more about the antagonist persona. I know you talked about that, and that was an aha moment for me, because that isn't someone or something that I usually think about when I'm thinking about personas or thinking about how someone might use products. So yeah, can you talk to us more about the antagonist persona?
Yes. So I think it's definitely something we need to work on with the research team, but it's all the people who want your service or people to be in trouble. So, and they exist every day we can see them on social media everywhere. But you have people who want to, so either they want to challenge your service and see if it works. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes they want something from them for them. And so, and they want to make sure they can find a way to get to get what they want to get. But so definitely it's something, we always think about people having good intention, but that's not always the case. So definitely that's the persona. I don't know if it's not the most important persona, but someone challenging your product. It's something you need to take care of too.
Yeah, agreed. Richard,
but the thing, sorry, the most challenging part is to get through this. Nobody is going to say I want to to use your product incorrectly. So the most difficult is to reach those people or understand their mental model. But I always like looking at forums and stuff like that, and you can understand stuff just by at least searching, even if you cannot talk to them.
Yeah, forums is a good place to find where real people are sharing real thoughts, and you get pretty direct to the source.
Exactly.
Richard asks, what is the name of the book you mentioned? Is it Designing for Your Life? Designing for Your Life.
And sorry for the name, so I'm going to share the correct names right now. Real Life. Yes, it's from Sarah Butcher and Eric Mayer.
Okay, we'll also put those in the show notes afterwards.
Yeah.
What other resources have you found helpful, or do you want to get into more when considering challenging the happy path?
I think something I really like is, you have the Humanity Center from Viviane Castillo. I think they talk about so many subjects. It's not only about happy path, but about being human-centered. And I think it's a program that really helped me and challenged a lot of things that I do and I can do differently. I think I see Jess being here, but this community, sometimes I see discussion that are super interesting too. And I've engaged with people just about those topics in those forums. And I know some people, I think there is 2 people who are writing books about those issues. But I don't have their name. I was looking, but I could not find the names. But I will find the name and it will be in the show notes. But there is 2 books coming. One is going to be published at a book apart too, about all the trauma and the bad use, the misuse, etc. So I think it's something to follow. Sorry for the name again. But I think it's a topic that's not being addressed. And I think it's something we need to consider in our job too, because I mean, we are designer, and like I said, having those storytelling skills make us a really good asset to think, I mean, not about everything, and we still need research and other designers, but to anticipate stuff too.
Yeah, agreed.
But you know, the last point is when I said when I feel about a lot of the topics just by reading about other writers, so the people who write about the violence and the people who write about trauma and all those topics, I've learned a lot just by reading those books or listening to those people, because like I said, when the man said, oh, if you have a user and you know he's gonna go through a really, really, really difficult situation, if you can, for me, caring in our job is about research, but if we and testing, but if we care, at least we know and we can anticipate, and we say, oh my God, I don't want my user to be in trouble. So what can I do for him or her, etc. And so I think it's all about that, and us thinking that other people like us, other writers have solutions they use every day and can inspire us or influence our work too.
Yeah, I think approaching work from a place of caring is never. I can't think of a place where that would be a bad thing, is to approach work from a place of caring.
Yeah, but you know, I mentioned humanity centered, but they had all this discussion about empathy too, and how empathy could be toxic. And yes, we need to. I mean, putting yourself in someone else's shoe is interesting, but researching, understanding is better, because at least you have no judgment, and so it's your research position that is going to help you decide. I mean, not decide, or put no judgment, just be neutral and understand and hear and see the pattern, and even if it's people you don't understand. And also what we want to avoid with that is you having to relate on what is going bad to make it real or to consider it's real. And so having the researcher hat, even if some people will never do research and maybe they're not interested, but at least if they're able to look at everything as a researcher when they do their work, it will help them be more inclusive, think about accessibility, think about everything else that can happen that they cannot relate, but it's not the job to relate on everything. It's just to accept that it exists. So it's just another position.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for that clarification.
No, you're welcome.
It looks like we don't have any more questions in either the chat or the Q&A. I guess I'll call it the last call for any questions. Thank you everyone for joining today. Like I said, we are trying something new. If you think this worked really well, or if you preferred how we had it before, feel free to message me either Slack or send me a message through Meetup. Would love to hear your thoughts and opinions and feedback on this. I know we had a little bit of technical difficulties in the beginning. Okay, that is all. I didn't see any last questions come in. Thank you everyone for joining, and I'll be posting the recording in a couple of days, and we will see you in August.